I'm going to tell you something that still makes me laugh every time I drive past that subdivision. Because these people spent almost $3 million trying to make my ranch disappear from their view, and somehow ended up trapping themselves behind their own little luxury kingdom like it was a medieval siege movie. And the crazy part is, none of this started over money. It started over embarrassment. My name's Caleb Turner. I'm 52, born and raised outside Prescott, Arizona, and my family's been running cattle on the same dusty stretch of land since Reagan was in office. Nothing fancy, just 38 acres of stubborn dirt, a faded red barn, rusted fencing that I keep meaning to replace, and enough hay stacked behind the stable to smell like dry summer all year long. Now, right beside my property sits Silver Creek Heights, one of those manicured HOA neighborhoods where every mailbox matches, every lawn looks vacuumed, and every driveway is so clean you could eat Thanksgiving dinner off it. They built that place about 9 years ago after developers started flooding the county with luxury desert living garbage, and from day one, they hated my ranch. Not because I was loud, not because my cattle caused problems. They hated me because I reminded them that their expensive little fantasy community used to be open ranch land before people started pretending Arizona was Beverly Hills with cactus. The worst of them was a woman named Denise Hallbrook, president of the HOA, real estate agent smile, ice-cold eyes, the kind of woman who says community standards the same way preachers say the Lord. Every monthly HOA newsletter somehow mentioned me without saying my name directly. Visual inconsistency adjacent to Western lots. Agricultural deterioration impacting neighborhood aesthetics. One time she actually called my equipment shed a corrosive visual distraction. Lady, it's a tractor barn, not a nuclear waste site. I ignored her for years because honestly, people like that survive on attention, and I had calves to brand and fences to fix. But then came that Thursday morning in late April. 5:47 a.m., still dark enough outside that the desert looked blue-gray under the sunrise, and I woke up to chainsaws. At first I thought maybe county crews were clearing dead mesquite near the road, but the sound was too close, too aggressive, and when I stepped onto my porch with boots half untied and coffee still brewing behind me, I saw 3 landscaping contractors in neon safety vests absolutely butchering my cedar windbreak. Now this wasn't some little decorative hedge. This line of cedar trees stretched almost 90 meters across the edge of my property, thick and tall enough to block dust storms, coyotes, and apparently Denise's precious mountain view. I planted those trees myself 16 years earlier after a monsoon season tore through my north pasture. Took years for them to mature, and these guys were dropping them like executioners. Limbs everywhere, sawdust floating through the morning light, trunks split open like broken ribs. One of the workers looked nervous when he saw me coming, but another guy just pointed at a laminated paper zip tied to one of the stumps like that somehow made this normal. I ripped it off and read, "Community obstruction successfully removed in accordance with Neighborhood Visual Improvement Initiative." I swear to God, Visual Improvement Initiative. They wrote that like they were liberating Europe. Denise herself pulled up about 2 minutes later in this pearl-white Range Rover, sunglasses already on at 6 in the morning like she was arriving at a movie set. She stepped out smiling, actually smiling, and said, "Mr. Turner, residents have complained about losing the canyon view for years. We decided to resolve the matter professionally." Professionally. I remember looking behind me at 16 years of shredded cedar laying across the dirt, and for a second I honestly couldn't even speak because my brain was trying to catch up with the level of arrogance standing in front of me. Then she added the line that changed everything. She crossed her arms and said, "Frankly, your property affects neighboring home values." There it was. Not noise. Not legality. Not safety. Shame. They wanted my land hidden because it embarrassed them. And right then, standing there with chainsaw smoke drifting through the sunrise, I realized something Denise didn't. She had just destroyed the single thing legally protecting her entire subdivision. I didn't yell. Didn't threaten anybody. I just nodded slowly, folded the notice into my back pocket, and walked back toward my barn while she stood there smirking like she'd won some kind of suburban war. What Denise didn't know was that 6 years earlier, when Silver Creek Heights got approved for development, the county forced them into an access easement agreement through the southwest corner of my ranch because they had no direct emergency exit onto Route 89. Tiny strip of land, about 20 feet wide, barely noticeable, but absolutely critical. And buried deep in that easement contract was one beautiful little clause tied directly to my cedar windbreak. A clause Denise had apparently never read. And once I remembered it, well, I stopped being angry. Because suddenly this whole thing wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about leverage. Now before I tell you what happened next, let me explain something real quick, because this is where a lot of HOA people make the same mistake over and over again. They confuse rules with power. And those are not the same thing. See, according to standard procedure in most planned communities, an HOA can only enforce regulations inside property lines specifically governed by their CC and AMP, RS, their covenants, conditions, and restrictions. That authority feels unlimited when you're fining people over mailbox colors and basketball hoops. So after a while, certain board members start acting like they're county officials instead of glorified neighborhood volunteers. Denise had fallen straight into that mindset. From a legal perspective, what those contractors did that morning was destruction of private property, plain and simple. Didn't matter how ugly they thought my trees were. Didn't matter how many residents complained about blocked scenery. Because once landscaping sits fully inside private boundaries, touching it without consent becomes a liability nightmare. But here's the part that really matters: the easement. Easements are weird little legal creatures. People think owning access means owning control, but usually it's conditional. In this case, Silver Creek Heights only retained emergency road access through my land if certain environmental protections remained intact, specifically the cedar barrier that prevented wildlife migration into residential lots. And honestly, that clause existed for a reason. Arizona elk don't care about HOA regulations. Neither do javelinas. This is a psychological trap affluent neighborhoods fall into all the time. They become obsessed with appearance because appearance becomes identity. Once a community starts measuring status through visual perfection, anything rustic, old, or uncontrolled starts feeling like a threat. Denise didn't cut those trees because she hated cedar. She cut them because my ranch reminded her residents that nature existed before their development did. And the lesson here is simple. When people become arrogant enough to think money overrides boundaries, eventually they stop reading the fine print. That's usually when the real problems begin. So after Denise drove away feeling victorious, I walked straight into my office beside the barn, pulled the easement file out of an old metal cabinet, and read Clause 9 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Nope. There it was in black ink, clear as desert sky. Removal or destruction of designated natural wildlife barriers by grantee or associated agents immediately voids access privileges until full ecological restoration has been completed to grantor satisfaction. To grantor satisfaction. Beautiful words. I actually laughed out loud sitting there alone because somewhere, some county lawyer years earlier had accidentally handed me the biggest reverse card in Arizona history. And the thing about ranch life is, you learn not to move emotionally. Emotional people lose negotiations. Calm people win them. So I made exactly 3 phone calls. First call was to my attorney. Second was to a local fencing company. Third was to the county access office. By noon, everything was already in motion. Friday morning, less than 24 hours after my trees hit the ground, a steel security gate got installed directly across the easement road cutting through my southwest pasture. Heavy black steel, concrete posts, industrial padlock. Looked like the entrance to a military base. Then I hung a sign right in the center. Private access revoked. Easement terminated PR Clause 9. Real simple. No insults. No profanity. Just facts. Around 7:30 a.m., the first wave of panic started. Residents trying to leave for work rolled up to the gate one after another like confused cattle. BMWs, Teslas, luxury SUVs, all stacking up in this perfect little traffic jam, while people stepped out holding coffee cups and staring at the lock like it personally offended them. By 8:15, Denise came flying down the road in her Range Rover, so fast I thought she might actually hit the gate. She jumped out yelling before the engine even stopped. "You can't do this." And I remember leaning against the fence post sipping coffee thinking, "Lady, I absolutely can." I handed her a copy of the easement agreement with Clause 9 highlighted in yellow. She skimmed it once, then again slower, and I watched the exact moment confidence turned into fear behind her sunglasses. "This is temporary," she snapped. "You're obstructing emergency access." I shrugged and said, "No, Denise, Your contractors obstructed emergency access when they cut down federally documented wildlife barriers. She looked stunned that I even knew the wording. Then came my favorite part. She threatened lawyers. People like Denise always do that first because they think legal intimidation works on everybody. But I'd already spoken to county officials that morning. The easement suspension had been formally acknowledged pending dispute review. In plain English, she was cooked. By day 2, the consequences started rolling in hard. See, those cedar trees weren't just decoration. They blocked wildlife movement from the northern wash straight into the subdivision. Without them, animals followed the easiest open route available, which now led directly into Silver Creek Heights. Around sunset Saturday evening, the first elk wandered in. Then more followed. By midnight, nearly 30 elk had spread across the neighborhood lawns like they'd booked a vacation resort. And if you've never seen suburban people deal with full-grown desert elk before, man, it is unbelievable entertainment. One giant bull elk climbed halfway onto the hood of somebody's black Mercedes trying to reach ornamental shrubs near the windshield. 800 pounds of muscle and antlers crushed that hood like aluminum foil. Another one smashed through decorative fencing behind a pool area while residents screamed from their patios holding wine glasses. Security footage from the neighborhood later showed one terrified guy banging pots together in his bathrobe at 2 in the morning, trying to scare elk away from his koi pond. Didn't work. They ate the landscaping instead. Denise's property got hit worst of all. Apparently, she'd spent thousands on imported flowers and decorative desert plants around her front walkway. By sunrise, it looked like a tornado had blended the entire yard into soup. I won't lie. I sat on my porch the next morning with coffee and watched the chaos through binoculars. Not proud of it. Okay, maybe a little proud. But mostly I was fascinated watching people realize that nature doesn't negotiate with HOA bylaws. Monday morning, things escalated from funny to catastrophic. Delivery drivers started refusing the 8-mile detour route because it added nearly 40 minutes to larger supply runs. Landscaping crews canceled appointments. School traffic backed up onto the county highway. Then came the moment that shifted everything emotionally. An ambulance responding to a cardiac emergency inside Silver Creek Heights got delayed almost 18 minutes rerouting around the closed easement road. The man survived, thankfully, but suddenly this wasn't about property values anymore. Residents were furious. And here's what Denise never anticipated. Rich neighborhoods turn on leadership fast the second inconvenience becomes personal. By Tuesday evening, homeowners were openly arguing during emergency HOA meetings. Somebody leaked emails showing Denise had authorized the tree removal without properly reviewing county easement restrictions. Oh, that changed the atmosphere real quick. Now she wasn't the savior protecting property values anymore. She was the reason their luxury neighborhood was trapped behind a locked ranch gate, while elk trampled imported landscaping. Wednesday afternoon, Denise came to my property again. Except this time, she wasn't alone. She brought an attorney. Older guy, expensive suit, leather folder tucked under one arm, exhausted expression like he already hated this case before introducing himself. We sat on my porch while the wind pushed dust across the pasture and cattle moved slowly behind the fencing. I let them talk first. Denise tried sounding calm, but panic kept leaking through her voice. Mr. Turner, we'd like to discuss a reasonable solution. Funny how fast eyesore rancher becomes Mr. Turner once leverage changes hands. Her lawyer finally asked what conditions would satisfy restoration requirements under Clause 9. That was the moment. Checkmate. I walked inside, grabbed a prepared folder, and handed it across the table. The attorney opened it, then blinked twice reading the numbers. Because unlike Denise, I believe in preparation. Item 1. Full replacement of all destroyed cedar barriers using mature, transplanted trees matching previous environmental density standards. Total cost, $52,000. Item 2. Irrigation installation and 20-year maintenance guarantee paid entirely by Silver Creek Heights HOA. Item 3. New easement agreement replacing the old one entirely. 25-year renewable term. Annual access fee indexed to inflation. 5 years prepaid upfront. Item 4. Any construction, landscaping, grading, painting, fencing, or visual modification occurring within 60 feet of my property line now required my written approval. Denise nearly exploded reading that section. This is insane, she barked. I just leaned back calmly and said, No, Denise. Chainsawing another man's property at dawn was insane. This is business. Her attorney kept reading silently. Then he reached the penalty clause. $10,000 daily fines for unauthorized violations impacting my property buffer zone. He looked over the paper at Denise for a long, quiet second, and I could practically hear him deciding whether to bill hourly or flee the state entirely. Finally, he closed the folder slowly and asked the only question that mattered. If these terms are accepted, access is restored immediately upon restoration commencement? I nodded once. Denise stared at him in disbelief. You cannot seriously be considering this. And the lawyer gave her the most beautiful, exhausted answer I've ever heard in my life. Denise, you cut down protected barrier trees tied to a conditional easement. We are past the stage of good options. Silence. Pure silence except for wind moving through the pasture fencing. Then Denise signed. Just like that. 2 weeks later, crews arrived with massive mature cedar transplants hauled in on flatbed trucks. Bigger than the originals. Taller too. I personally approved every species selection, every placement, every inch of spacing. The HOA now pays for seasonal trimming, irrigation maintenance, and wildlife monitoring reports. And the funniest part? Residents actually prefer the new trees because elk stopped wandering into the subdivision entirely. Turns out barriers exist for reasons beyond aesthetics. Who knew? These days when I drive past Silver Creek Heights, the gate stays open, the cedar wall stands thicker than ever, and Denise avoids eye contact like I personally haunt her dreams. Last I heard, she lost re-election as HOA president by a landslide. Apparently homeowners don't appreciate being legally besieged because somebody got offended by a ranch view. And every now and then, usually around sunset, I'll sit on my porch with coffee watching elk graze peacefully behind those trees, and I think about how close Denise came to getting exactly what she wanted. She wanted the ranch hidden from sight. In the end, she paid a fortune to rebuild it bigger. Looking back now, I honestly think the strangest part of this whole mess wasn't the lawyers, or the elk, or even the money. It was how avoidable everything was. Because if Denise had just walked over one afternoon like a normal human being and said, "Hey Caleb, residents are complaining about the trees blocking the canyon," we probably could have worked something out over coffee in 15 minutes. Maybe trim a section, maybe thin the branches a little, who knows. But that's the problem with power inside certain HOA communities. After a while, people stop communicating and start enforcing. And once somebody gets addicted to control, compromise starts feeling like weakness. According to standard procedure in most neighborhood disputes, the situations that explode the worst are usually the ones where nobody bothers respecting boundaries early on. Physical boundaries, legal boundaries, personal boundaries, all of it matters. Denise thought ownership gave her authority over appearance beyond her property line, and from a legal perspective, that mindset is exactly what destroys a lot of HOA boards across America. They forget homeowners are still individuals with rights, not NPCs inside a perfectly curated real estate brochure. But honestly, the legal side isn't even the most important lesson here. This is a psychological trap people fall into everywhere, not just HOAs. The second someone starts believing their comfort matters more than another person's autonomy, they begin justifying behavior that would sound insane in any other context. Imagine explaining this story out loud without the fancy neighborhood language. We secretly hired contractors to destroy a rancher's trees because we didn't like looking at his property. That sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. And yet once people wrap selfishness in words like community standards or property values, suddenly they convince themselves they're the reasonable ones. The lesson here is simple. Never confuse politeness with weakness. I stayed quiet for years while Denise mocked my ranch in newsletters and treated my land like some ugly inconvenience surrounding her development. She mistook restraint for surrender. Big mistake. And honestly, revenge wasn't even the satisfying part. The satisfying part was watching reality reintroduce itself to people who thought money insulated them from consequences. Nature didn't care about their HOA meetings. County law didn't care about their luxury branding. And that easement contract definitely didn't care about Denise's opinion of my barn. In the end, all those residents got a very expensive reminder that respecting your neighbors is usually cheaper than trying to dominate them. So yeah, if you ever move into one of those perfect-looking neighborhoods with matching mailboxes and smiling HOA boards, Read the fine print before you start declaring war on the guy next door. Sometimes the old rancher with muddy boots knows the rules better than everybody else at the meeting table. And trust me, those are not the people you want to underestimate.